Inside a mansion built of gold and ice, a billionaire's legendary fury was triggered by a child's mistake. But when the glass shattered, the world didn't end. It cracked open a secret so devastating, it brought a titan to his knees. What did she see in his eyes? If you were to walk through the towering wrought iron gates of Kingston Manor tonight, you would see a billionaire's paradise illuminated by million-dollar crystal chandeliers. But what you wouldn't see is the suffocating despair baked into the pristine white marble, the invisible blood of a man buried alive within his own fortress, and the desperate 7-year-old girl who dared to step into the graveyard of his soul. For over 4 decades, I have kept the darkest, most agonizing secrets of the Kingston dynasty locked tightly behind my lips. I have watched a family built on mountains of gold rot from the inside out. But at 68 years old, standing near the edge of eternity, the silence has become too heavy to bear. I have witnessed a man who owned half the eastern seaboard realize that his absolute power was completely useless against the fragility of human life. And I have seen the chilling reality that the illusion of unimaginable wealth often conceals the most brutal, unforgiving hells on earth. If you are drawn to the hidden truths behind closed doors and stories of broken souls finding miraculous redemption, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support is the driving force that motivates us to continue producing and sharing these profoundly healing, untold stories in the future. Warmly welcomes you, and we invite you to step into the shadows of Kingston Manor with an open heart. I am Vera, the head housekeeper, and for my entire adult life, I have stood quietly in the unseen corners of this colossal estate. To the outside world, this mansion is a beacon of supreme triumph. But I know it for what it truly is, a gigantic, freezing, and desolate mausoleum erected to entomb the living. The master of this prison is Alexander Kingston. At 45, he commands a financial empire that ruthlessly dominates the economy, possessing everything the mortal world viciously craves. Yet, he looks out at the world with the hollow, desolate eyes of a man who died a long time ago. The veil of his past hides a series of bleeding traumas that simply refuse to heal. A profoundly bitter divorce from his elite wife did not just break his home. It brutally stripped him of the right to raise his only biological daughter. The void left behind was immediately filled by so-called relatives and a board of directors, vultures draped in bespoke suits who viewed Alexander as nothing more than a mechanical printing press for their endless greed. In their ruthless dictionary, low-level employees and the vulnerable were casually dismissed as dead weight, mere parasites clinging to the coattails of high society. To survive this viper's nest, Alexander methodically froze his own heart. He transformed his home into a psychological penitentiary, ruling over every square inch with iron discipline and absolute apathy, viewing any display of human emotion as a disgusting, unforgivable weakness. And yet, within this suffocating, pitch-black underworld of Kingston Manor, fragile seeds of life stubbornly clung to the cold stone. That life was Maria, a chambermaid who had toiled under my supervision for 8 grueling years. Maria was the very definition of silent endurance. Her husband had vanished into thin air, leaving her drowning in a massive ocean of debt and a young child to feed. To the aristocratic guests who frequented the manor, Maria was invisible, merely a peasant, a failed housewife forced into menial servitude. But to me, she was a colossal mother, draining every last drop of her life force, biting her tongue through endless humiliations just to secure a meager meal and a safe corner for her daughter. Accompanying Maria was little Lily, a 7-year-old ghost who practically lived in the shadows of the servant corridors to avoid the master's wrath. Lily possessed a pair of amber eyes that held an exhaustion far too heavy for her age, yet they harbored an inexplicably profound empathy. She was never loud, never demanding. She simply observed this chaotic, glittering world with a haunting stillness that, on many days, brought a bitter ache to an old woman's heart like mine. Together, this mother and daughter were two fragile, deeply human pieces of a puzzle that stood in total defiance to the terrifying, artificial grandeur of the Kingston Empire. It was on a bitterly cold November evening, when the manor felt more like a sprawling crypt than ever, that the fragile barrier between these two wildly contrasting worlds was irreparably shattered. The unspoken rule of Kingston Manor was simple. When the master was in his private study, the West Wing was dead space, an absolute void where no servant dared to breathe, let alone walk. But children, even those as silent and cautious as little Lily, are prone to innocent mistakes. A loose calico kitten had slipped through the kitchen doors, and in her desperate, terrified attempt to catch it before it caused a disturbance, Lily chased it right into the lion's den. I was polishing silver in the adjoining dining room when I heard the sickening crash of shattering glass. My blood ran completely cold. I dropped my cloth and sprinted toward the study, fully prepared to throw myself between Alexander's legendary, earth-shattering fury and the trembling child. When I burst through the heavy mahogany doors, what I witnessed stopped the very breath in my lungs. A priceless antique vase lay in 1,000 jagged pieces across the Persian rug, and standing at the epicenter of the destruction was Lily, clutching the stray kitten to her chest. Alexander was out of his leather chair, towering over her like a thundercloud ready to unleash absolute devastation. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were stark white, and his jaw was set in that familiar, terrifying line of pure disdain. I opened my mouth to beg for mercy, to offer my own resignation in exchange for the girl's safety. But before I could utter a single syllable, Lily did the unthinkable. She did not cower. She did not cry. She took one small step forward, navigating the sharp shards of porcelain, and looked directly up into the eyes of the most intimidating man in the financial world. With her unnervingly perceptive amber eyes, she peered past the bespoke suit and the billion-dollar scowl, staring straight into the bleeding, terrified soul of a man who missed his own child. "I am so sorry I broke your pretty thing, sir," Lily whispered, her voice like a tiny silver bell in the cavernous room. "But you don't have to look so sad anymore. It was just a vase. It wasn't someone you loved." The silence that followed was so profound it practically rang in my ears. Alexander physically recoiled, as if the 7-year-old had just struck him in the chest with a sledgehammer. The absolute rage drained from his face, replaced by a ghost of shock, followed instantly by a devastating vulnerability I had not seen in him for over a decade. He looked at the broken shards, then at the little girl holding a stray cat, and the impenetrable fortress of ice he had spent years building around his heart developed its first jagged crack. He did not yell. He did not call for security. He simply sank back into his chair, covered his face with his trembling hands, and dismissed us with a weak wave, leaving me to pull Lily away as the first echoes of a suppressed sob echoed through the freezing study. That quiet, suspended moment of impossible grace in the study became the invisible catalyst that slowly began to thaw the permafrost encasing the master's desolate soul. The transformation was not immediate, nor was it loud. But to an old woman who knew the rhythms of this house like the back of her own hand, it was as deafening as a seismic shift. Alexander Kingston, a man who previously walked through his own home as if the staff were mere ghosts haunting his peripheral vision, suddenly began to linger. I would catch him standing in the shadows of the grand staircase, his hollow eyes quietly tracking Maria as she scrubbed the marble floors until her hands were raw and blistered. He watched the way she would subtly stretch her aching back, only to force a bright, exhausted smile whenever Lily peeked around the corner. He began to see the agonizing sacrifices that defined true parenthood, a stark contrast to the sterile, transactional custody battles he had endured with his ex-wife. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander was forced to juxtapose the genuine, bleeding love of a destitute chambermaid with the hollow, parasitic greed of the elites who circled his empire. His board members and sycophantic relatives still came to the manor, dining on caviar and vintage wine, loudly complaining about the incompetence of the working class and the rising costs of human labor. I watched Alexander during these lavish dinners. Previously, he would nod in apathetic agreement, entirely numb to their cruelty. Now I saw his jaw tick. I saw a profound, simmering disgust brewing behind his dark eyes as he looked at these wealthy vultures, finally recognizing them for the emotional parasites they truly were. They were men and women who possessed billions, but lacked the fundamental decency of the maid serving their soup. The shifts in his behavior became tangible, quietly rippling through the dark corridors of the estate. It started with anonymous gestures. The crippling debt collectors who mercilessly hounded Maria's cell phone every afternoon suddenly stopped calling. Their accounts mysteriously settled in full by an untraceable corporate entity. A plush, heated winter coat appeared in the servants' quarters with a tag bearing Lily's name, accompanied by a selection of classic children's books that looked suspiciously identical to the ones Alexander used to read to his own daughter. When Maria brought these miracles to me, weeping tears of terrified gratitude, I simply smiled and told her it was the grace of God. But I knew the truth. I saw the way Alexander's posture had straightened, the way the deathly pallor of his skin was slowly being replaced by the flush of living, breathing humanity. He was secretly constructing a safety net for a mother and child he owed absolutely nothing to, finding a desperate, aching redemption in their survival. He was learning that while his absolute power could not bring back the family he had lost, it could be repurposed as a mighty shield to protect the fragile, beautiful things that were desperately trying to bloom in the dark corners of his gilded tomb. But the encroaching warmth radiating from Alexander's reawakening heart did not go unnoticed by the vicious parasites circling his estate, and they soon unleashed a tempest meant to violently eradicate this newfound weakness. The catalyst for this nightmare was Eleanor, Alexander's elder sister, and a woman whose veins flowed with liquid nitrogen instead of blood. She arrived unannounced one rainy Tuesday, draped in mink and dripping in diamonds, intent on securing Alexander's signature to liquidate a manufacturing plant that would leave thousands of working-class families destitute. While prowling the corridors, Eleanor stumbled upon Lily sitting quietly in the conservatory, drawing pictures on a scrap of paper. To Eleanor, a servant's child daring to exist in the master's sunlight was an unforgivable contamination of her aristocratic sanctuary. The fury she unleashed was swift and brutal. She summoned Maria to the grand foyer, her shrieking voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings as she accused the trembling mother of gross insubordination, trespassing, and, out of pure malicious spite, the theft of a diamond brooch. I stood in the corner of the foyer, my heart pounding violently against my ribs as I stepped forward to defend Maria, only to be harshly backhanded by Eleanor's private security guard. Maria dropped to her knees on the cold marble, sobbing uncontrollably, wrapping her arms around a terrified Lily and begging for mercy. Eleanor coldly ordered the guards to throw them out into the torrential rain and threatened to have the police waiting at the bottom of the driveway to lock Maria away for a crime she did not commit. The the despair in that room was suffocating, a heavy, suffocating blanket of absolute injustice. Maria was breaking, preparing to drag her crying child into the freezing storm, convinced that the world belonged solely to the cruel and the powerful. And then, the heavy oak doors of the upper balcony swung open with a resounding crack. Alexander descended the grand staircase, and I had never seen him look more terrifyingly magnificent. He did not possess the detached, hollow apathy of the broken billionaire I had known for years. He radiated the lethal, calculated wrath of a protector whose sanctuary had been violated. He bypassed Eleanor entirely, stepping between the armed guards and the weeping mother. With a voice that was eerily calm, yet carried the devastating force of a hurricane, he ordered the guards out of his house. When Eleanor sputtered in indignant rage, demanding to know why he was protecting a pathetic peasant who was stealing from them, Alexander turned his chilling gaze upon his sister. He methodically dismantled her. He laid bare her embezzlements, her shallow cruelties, and the sickening reality that she was the true parasite feeding on the Kingston name. In a span of 3 minutes, he permanently severed her from his empire, revoking her access to his wealth, his properties, and his life. He watched her storm out into the rain, a defeated tyrant stripped of her unearned crown. As the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, Alexander knelt down onto the pristine marble floor, completely ruining his tailored suit, and gently wiped the tears from little Lily's cheeks, promising her that as long as he drew breath, no one would ever frighten her again. With the toxic shadows permanently expelled from the manor, the dawn that followed brought a miraculous resurrection to the once hallowed halls of the Kingston estate. The terrifying dictator who had ruled this psychological penitentiary died that rainy afternoon in the foyer, and the man who rose from his ashes was someone I had prayed for, but never thought I would live to see. Alexander did not simply offer Maria her job back. He fundamentally rewrote the destiny of her bloodline. He elevated her from a chambermaid to the estate manager, recognizing the immense resilience and logistical brilliance it took to keep a child alive on nothing but scraps and sheer willpower. He set up an impenetrable trust fund for Lily, ensuring that the brilliant, empathetic girl with the amber eyes would have access to the finest education the world could offer, free from the crushing, suffocating anxieties of poverty. But the most profound change was not financial. It was deeply, beautifully human. The heavy, suffocating silence of Kingston Manor was finally broken by the joyous sounds of genuine life. Alexander began taking his afternoon tea in the gardens, insisting that Maria and Lily join him. I watched from the kitchen window, weeping silent tears of absolute joy as the billionaire who once owned half the eastern seaboard spent his weekends sitting in the grass, clumsily helping a 7-year-old girl fly a kite. He became the father figure he had been brutally denied the chance to be, and in return, Lily and Maria became the anchor that tethered his drifting, bleeding soul back to reality. They taught him that true wealth is not measured by the zeros in a bank account or the terror one inspires in the boardroom, but by the safety and warmth one provides to the vulnerable. He learned to laugh again, a deep, resonant sound that chased the lingering ghosts out of the grand hallways. Now, as I stand at the twilight of my 68th year, watching the golden autumn leaves fall across the pristine lawns, I know my time in this world is drawing to a gentle close. But I will leave with a heart full of absolute peace. I have borne witness to the darkest depths of human greed, and I have seen the devastating toll of trauma. But I have also seen the spectacular, undeniable triumph of compassion. Kingston Manor is no longer a gilded tomb erected to entomb the living. It is a home, vibrant and breathing, anchored by a man who finally realized that saving one desperate family from the brink of ruin was the only investment that could ever save his own life. The frozen billionaire melted into a man of profound warmth, and the little ghost of the servants' corridors grew into a brilliant young woman who knows she is deeply, unconditionally loved. This is the secret I have kept hidden behind the towering wrought iron gates, a testament to the fact that even in the most desolate, freezing hells on earth, all it takes is one small spark of empathy to ignite a roaring fire of redemption. The story of Alexander, Maria, and Lily serves as a poignant reminder that the most formidable prisons we construct are often within our own minds. Alexander Kingston had built an empire of staggering wealth, yet he was starving for the one currency that truly mattered: genuine human connection. His transformation from a cold, untouchable tycoon into a compassionate protector proves that redemption is always within reach, no matter how deeply one's heart has frozen over. It took the innocent courage of a 7-year-old girl and the selfless devotion of a struggling mother to shatter the invisible walls of his gilded cage. Ultimately, true wealth is never found in offshore accounts or vast estates. It is cultivated in the quiet, profound moments of kindness we extend to those who can offer us nothing in return. By stepping out of his ivory tower to shield the vulnerable, Alexander did not just save a desperate family from the brutal storm of poverty, he salvaged his own humanity. The sprawling manor, once a sterile crypt echoing with the ghosts of past traumas, was reborn as a sanctuary of warmth and unconditional love. This beautiful metamorphosis illustrates that true power is not wielded by dominating others or accumulating endless resources, but by lifting up the broken, offering grace in the face of fear, and allowing ourselves to be deeply, wonderfully human again. The most profound takeaway is that empathy is the ultimate catalyst for healing, and true power lies in protection, not oppression. We often build walls around our hearts to shield ourselves from pain, inadvertently trapping ourselves in a cycle of isolation. But when we shift our focus from accumulating worldly success to nurturing human dignity, we unlock a far richer, more meaningful existence. In today's fast-paced, hyper-competitive world, it is incredibly easy to become emotionally detached or view relationships as purely transactional. To apply this lesson, look at your immediate surroundings. You do not need to be a billionaire to change a life. Use whatever wealth you have, be it your time, a listening ear, professional mentorship, or a simple word of encouragement, to shield and uplift someone who is struggling. Break the cycle of indifference by choosing to truly see the often invisible people in your daily routine. When you use your position, however small, to advocate for the vulnerable, you create a ripple effect of warmth that ultimately heals your own soul. What is one small act of kindness someone else did for you that completely changed your day or your perspective? Please kindly share your stories and thoughts in the comments section below. We would love to read your perspectives so our entire community can be inspired by your experiences. If you enjoyed this story and found value in its message, please subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and gives us the motivation to keep creating more beautiful, high-quality stories for you in the future.